Nothing improves our day quite like a cake, don't you think? I decided to make this video because I spent a long time working on a panettone recipe, but after about 10 versions, I still wasn't satisfied with my result. So one of my Christmas videos will be this spiced apple cake that is, in fact, very easy to make and impossible for anyone to dislike. Unless that person doesn't like cake, apples or spices, in which case I wouldn't want to associate myself with that kind of people anyway. For this cake, we make a mixture with the dry ingredients, one with the wet ingredients, chop up the apples, and then put everything together. Very simple. With my ingredients separated, I'm going to take a large bowl and at the bottom start putting the smaller ingredients, so to speak, because it's easier to correct in case I make a mistake. Don't worry, the ingredients are in the description box. Once that's done, I'm going to take a regular mug like that to measure the flour and sugar, but in the description box I also left measurements by weight. So first go the flour in that same container, which will be the dry one. Now I set it aside and start making a spice mix. I'm going to use a cinnamon stick, some allspice, which despite the name, is not a spice that tastes like all, some black pepper, cardamom, whole cloves, a few pieces of bay leaf, and one of those nuggets of nutmeg that get left behind and we don't use it so as to not grate our own fingers. And then I'm going to grind it with this coffee grinder, which I've never used to grind coffee because coffee beans are very expensive. In case you don't have a coffee grinder or even the spices I'm using, you can use whatever you have available, including just ground cinnamon, which will be very tasty still. With the ground mixture, I sieve it directly on top of the flour, because my grinder never pulverizes everything completely, and it would be pretty nasty to break a tooth on a piece of nutmeg, especially on Christmas, when we need all our teeth to be able to eat a lot. And then, with a wooden spoon, I mix all the dry ingredients, but you could use a whisk or even sieve the whole mixture if you prefer. Now it's time to prepare the wet mixture, and for that, I'm going to use the same mug as before to measure the sugar, but remember that the amount in grams is in the description of the video. While I'm cracking the eggs, if you thought it was weird that I mentioned sugar while I was talking about wet ingredients, it's just that sugar is considered wet and not dry because it melts. After the eggs, I add thick cream, but you could use sour cream or plain yogurt instead. The fat in the cream or the acidity in the yogurt will make the cake fluffier. And then just mix everything very well with the same wooden spoon. No need for mixer or anything like that. At this stage, you could also add some vanilla if you'd like. With our two mixtures, one dry and one wet, ready, it's time to tackle the apples. I'm going to use 4 regular sized apples, and it's best to use more than one variety so that the cake has a greater variety of flavors. Nevertheless, you can use only one. I usually take the sticker off because it typically gives me indigestion. If you've seen any of my videos, you'll know that I'm the honorary president of the National Association of Food Peelers. So since these apples aren't organic, I'm peeling them, because the apple in particular is one of the fruits whose cultivation uses enormous amounts of pesticide and agricultural defensives, and the safest way to eliminate our exposure to those chemicals is to peel this type of food. Washing does not help much because part of the pesticide is absorbed by their skin. After peeling, I roughly chopped the apples because, to be honest, it was very hot the day I recorded this video and I didn't have a lot of patience, but the size of the pieces is up to you. I just don't recommend that you grate the apples because it can make them release a lot of liquid and I think the cake wouldn't work, but you can try and tell me in the comments how it turned out. As I chop each apple, I plop the pieces into the sugar, egg and cream mixture so they don't oxidize or change color, but that's purely aesthetic. By the way, you can make the same cake with chopped bananas instead of apples. Before mixing the dry with the wet, I'm going to prepare the mold. In theory, this pan is a non-stick, but I don't trust it, so I'm going to butter it very well. If you're a bit fussy about using clean hands in the kitchen, you can do the same thing with a paper towel, but I'm pretty sure the cake won't taste very good. And then I add some flour, which I rub into the mold using the shake and tap method, which is also the official method for dealing with remote controls or even cell phones that aren't working. As there was a little left, I put it straight into the bowl with the dry ingredients because it won't make any difference, but if you have a lot of excess, don't do that. And now it's time for the wetting between the dry and the wet. I mix everything with the same wooden spoon as at the beginning until there is no more flour left. That is, you shouldn't keep mixing for too long, otherwise the cake would be hard and dry because the gluten in the flour would develop too much. After that, the mixture goes into the mold that I had already prepared. You can also bake this cake in a square and low pan. And then it's time to go to the oven. After baking, I wait about 5 minutes. In that time, the cake shrinks a little. I like to give the pan a few shakes to loosen it up properly. And then I turn the cake over on a wire rack to cool faster. And then place the cake back in the pan to make it easier to transfer to the plate. However, you can let it cool in the pan for about 15 minutes and transfer it straight onto the plate. I don't add any icing or syrup because I don't think the cake needs it, but that's up to you. I just sprinkled some powdered sugar on top to make it cute for the video. This is a very different cake in terms of texture and flavor, as well as the fact that it's full of apples. You can, if you want, add raisins and nuts as well. That will be very tasty too.